Hello, everybody. I think we are live. Thanks to anybody that has turned up to greet us on this momentous occasion. Really happy to have with me. Right, I'm just gonna. Yeah, just had to turn off the YouTube there because we kind of got that blasting in at the same time. But welcome, folks. Really great to be joined by Kate, Ray and Dr. Neil Rushton this evening. Of course, you will know Kate and Neil from Hare and the Hawthorn, amazing channel on YouTube. If you're interested in all things fairy, get yourself subscribed there. There's always interesting conversations and guests, and yeah, it's a fantastic show. So, and it's been a while since we got together, but welcome both of you.
Thank you, Jo. It's going to be a good evening. I can see people saying hello already. So hello, everybody.
Oh, nice. Brilliant.
Yeah, no, great to be here. I should just say I can't see the comments, so you're gonna have to tell me what they're saying. And if anyone says anything bad about me, don't tell me.
Oh, we're going to tell you. We're so going to tell you.
I'm sure there'll be members of the Neil Rushton fan club turning up tonight, Neil. So I think you'll be all right. You know, they'll get sorted out by the mob, so I wouldn't worry about that. So yeah, we kind of decided that we would just see if anyone had any questions, and because everyone is always mulling over various things to do with all things fairy, and as it's a while since we managed to have a catch up, usually we get together and talk about Wollaton and gnomes, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we're kind of opening it up.
I like the fact if anybody saw it that Jo called us gnome botherers, and I think that's quite fitting really, because we have spent a couple of years going out bothering the gnomes of Wollaton Park, bless them. Much to the disgruntlement of the gnomes, I think, that we found out the last time we were there.
No, I like the term the Wollaton Gnomes Massive. That's better. That's a good one.
Steve. It's showing your age now, aren't we? It's like we still think it's cool to say Wollaton Massive and dude and stuff, and it's like we're so Gen X, aren't we? No.
Yeah.
You'd have to be Gen X to go trudging round Wollaton Park Hall and in the rain and the wind looking for gnomes. But that's the way we grew up. That's the way we roll. So yeah, the Nottinghamshire gnome botherers reunion tonight, really. And yeah, so do you want to start off before? I don't know if you've got any questions yet, Kate. I might try and get that screen up again. But it'd be cool.
Have.
Oh, okay. Let's hit the road.
Yeah, we've got. I wonder if Neil has any updates on the park. He sometimes goes to that might have a fey feel to it. So that park that you go to every day, Neil, where the gardener has been creating the sculptures. Have you got any updates? Thanks, David.
Any update? Yeah, no. The park is called Vale Park. It overlooks the River Mersey, and I walk along almost every day. I go to Vale Park. And within it, it kind of sounds a bit naff if you haven't seen it. It's a fairy village there, and the guy who lives in the lodge house there is a very skilled woodworker, and he gets loads of driftwood from the Mersey and some of his own wood, and he makes these. Well, he's made a fairy village, and it's, like I say, it sounds a little bit naff, but when you're there, it's charming. It is absolutely charming. His sculptures are extremely high quality, and the kids just love it. You just always hearing kids, oh, we're going to the fairy village, and his fairies, his actual fairies that he's carved, are very, there's no winged fairies there. It's very Brian Froud like fairies. He's obviously been reading Brian Froud, and he's sort of copied his illustrations in wood. And it's absolutely charming. Unfortunately, just after Christmas, some ne'er-do-wells set fire to one of the fairy houses, and it went up in a blaze. And I went there today, and he's rebuilt it, repainted it. My local Facebook chat page was absolutely outraged that someone could go along and set fire to it. But out of the ashes, a phoenix has arisen, and it's all absolutely fantastic. So anyone on the Wirral or who visits the Wirral, get yourself along to Vale Park, and you can commune with the fairies there.
Oh, it'd be cool to see some pictures of that, Neil. Do you ever post any?
I don't take pictures. I don't do it. I believe it or not, I don't have a smartphone. So
you've got a candy phone, haven't you? You've got a prison phone.
That's right.
You've got one of the prison. Sorry. We've got another question from Alice Rose, who says, can you explain what are elementals? Do you want me to start off with that one?
Go for it. Can I just check, by the way, was that David Wood that asked that last question?
Yeah.
Well, hello, David. And if anyone is interested in art relating to fairies and just plein air art, is that the right way to pronounce it? I hope so. Plein air. Go and check out David Wood Art, because David is an incredible, intuitive artist and an award-winning artist. So he kind of does both. So go and check out his work, because you should find him on Instagram. Thanks for the question from Alice Rose as well. And hi, Alice. I know Alice, and she is tuning in from, I think it's actually New Zealand. So yeah,
wow.
So lovely. Yeah,
we're going global. That's nice to know. It'd be nice to know where everybody's from, which is the furthest reach, because I reckon New Zealand's probably winning hands down right now, isn't it, all the way over there? So elementals is something I'm sure you guys are asked about quite a lot. And for me, it's just become a synonymous sort of mashup with the term fairies. But its origins, I think, are very different. And I think that the elemental characters have become part of the fairy community. But it was 16th century alchemy that invited elemental aspects into the world with the four elements. So you've got water, air, fire, and earth. So you've got the gnomes, sylphs, undines, and salamanders. Now, those things have kind of rolled into the general umbrella of fairies. I used to have a real bugbear about people calling fairies elementals, but I understand why they do, because people tend to now use the term for things that live in specific environments or within nature. So they're not kind of the house brownies, don't really come under that. And it's a real slippery thing. We were talking before coming on about, what are fairies? And the whole subject is so slippery, it's so mercurial. But that's my understanding. I mean, what's your guys' thoughts about what elementals are?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Paracelsus initially with those kind of four categories, it sort of then picked up again by Rudolf Steiner, well, the Theosophists, and they, a lot of the, I guess, kind of tipping in then into the New Age, a lot of ideas that we had about fairy would have come from all of these places. And so you start to think about fairies as nature spirits, and that's kind of where that comes from. And the thing is that that's partly true. They are within nature, but they're not limited to that. They are more than that. They are everywhere. They are. So when we're connecting, for instance, with a tree or with a plant, then yes, there is the spirit element of that plant that can be communed with. Whether you're going to pick some, for instance, recently, I'm really drawn to a rosemary bush in my garden, which I rescued a couple of years ago from a skip, and it was kind of half shriveled away in a tiny thing, and it's really happy where it is. And just recently I need clarity because I'm writing, and it really called to me. Now I can't say whether that is the kind of elemental of that plant that called to me, although I do feel a real affiliation with that plant now, and it's so happy and got really big and healthy. But I was called to that plant, and people talk a lot about this, where they will either connect with the tree, and is it the being, the spiritual being of that tree, the elemental of that tree that they're connecting with, or something else. then again, like you mentioned, Kate, you've got brownies in the house. Well, that doesn't fit into the kind of nature side of things. Or the other thing you could think about that is, or does it? Because is there a stream running alongside the house? Is there something in the garden, a tree that is related to the house in some way? So again, you could kind of think of it that way. But generally, the ideas we work with is that fairies are everywhere, and the elemental kind of categorization of them, because of course we like to make sense of things as human beings and start to categorize them. That's just one part. Yeah. But what would you say, Neil?
Yeah, I think you've covered it pretty well between the two of you. It's I think although Paracelsus was the first one to really classify the elementals in the sort of early 16th century, it's really the Theosophists, especially Rudolf Steiner, as you say, who popularized the idea. So it's only from the very late 19th century and early 20th century that you really get this idea of elementals. And I think the terms elementals, fairies, pixies, elves, to me these days, they're all interchangeable. Because I know we'll get onto the big topic of what are the fairies, but in essence, whatever you call them, they are some kind of immaterial, non-human, intelligent entity. And whether it's a sylph or a brine fruit gnome or whatever you want to call them, that's where they're coming from. And as you say, Joe, we like to classify things. And I don't think there really is any kind of line between nature spirits, elementals, fairies. I think they are all mostly the same thing.
Yeah, cool. Well, great question. Thank you, Alice Rose, for that. Yeah.
Can I just give a rundown to where we have people in the world? So we really have we've gone global. This is quite exciting. I'm quite nervous. Wow. So we've got somebody from Missouri. Sorry if I've missed your name off this. I'm scribbling notes as I go. This is how high tech that I am on the live chat. We've got Missouri. We've got Midlands, up the Midlands. Sorry, that was very Gen X. Michigan, we've got Yorkshire, Germany, or Yorkshire. We've really broken a bracket with the Yorkshire, haven't we?
Gone, yeah.
Germany, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. So we've got a lot from the States, which is really nice. Another one from the Northeast. Before we go on to the next question, I've had a question about a box. Now, for those who haven't been over to Hare in the Hawthorn, our last interview that we did was about remote viewing. And right at the very beginning of the session, I brought out a golden box and I was testing people's ability to be able to remote view. It was just a bit of fun, really. Now, I'm not going to reveal it just yet. I'll reveal it right at the end of the live. But if you just hang on 1 second, I'm going to get the box. And if anybody wants to play along during this live to see if they can get a feel for what's in the box, I'm going to show it to you. So just excuse me while I slope off for 2 seconds. Okay. So this is the box. It's just a golden box. It's not very thick. So if you want to check out your psychic abilities, there's only the prize of being the fairy seer. That's no clue, by the way. I don't want to pop things into people's heads. But yes, at the end, I will reveal what's in the box.
That is
I'll tell
really
you what,
cool.
Joe. Neil hates me doing things like that, where I go off piste and I'm just like, we're going to do something different. And he's like, oh, no. Right, we have got another question, which is really good. Again, from David Wood. And I'm just kind of compacting this because it's run away somewhere. Okay. Where do fairies go? Where do they live? And have they got a land of their own?
Neil,
Right,
do you want to
give
that one a bash?
I have some ideas. Well, as I said a moment ago, fairies, in essence, have to be immaterial, non-corporeal. They, despite the things you'll see about little fairy bodies being found, we know that's not true. and you're not going to, because I'm pretty convinced, after the research I've been doing for years, that the fairies, whatever they are, belong in an ulterior reality, a standalone reality that can sometimes interact with our 3D material reality for whatever reasons. And I think the primary reason that they're able to interact with us from this ulterior reality is through consciousness. That's how they are interacting with us as humans, and maybe animals, and maybe trees as well, or vegetation. But let's just keep it at the human level, where if your consciousness is for whatever reason changed from its everyday consciousness, where we have to live in 3D reality, in this material reality, and we have to do all the things, and our brain processes our consciousness so that we can deal with it. If that consciousness is altered for whatever reason, can be many reasons that you can alter your state of consciousness, that, I think, the best solution I can think of is that the fairy type entities, whatever they are, wherever they are, can come into material reality. The best example, of course, usually fairy experiences are fairy type entities coming into our world and us experience them in our world. But the folklore has many stories, as you both obviously know, of people going to fairyland, or the place where the fairies abide outside of our 3D reality. Plenty of stories in the folklore, and bringing it up to date. And I hate to bring psychedelic drugs into this. Well, I don't really hate to do it, because it's always...
Don't do drugs at home. Don't do drugs at home, kids.
Yeah, no, that's right. Absolutely. But all of the recent study, the last couple of decades now, on the drug called dimethyltryptamine, DMT, where it's an extraordinary experience where your consciousness goes somewhere else that is super real, more real than this reality in many ways. And almost on every occasion, you will meet entities in that place, that ulterior reality outside of our 3D reality. And very often those entities can be classed as fairy type entities. So it's a two-way process, even though from our reality to their ulterior reality, where I would presume they exist in some form all of the time, maybe as a more pure energy form, and they only appear as fairies when they're in our reality. That's a possibility. But that's where I think they go when they're not bothering us.
Brilliant. I've got another one to follow on from that. I'm just writing it down now so I don't lose it. Guys, if I miss, because I am scribbling them down at a rate of knots, if I miss your question, please type it again a bit later on, and we will
in
get
capitals.
around as many. Yeah, in capitals.
In
That would be
capitals.
really yeah. So one that follows on from that, and one I think that we can all answer in kind of snippets, because I think that these things are they can be slightly subjective, can't they, from differing angles. So following on from that, do fairies have a society like humans? For example, why do they wear clothes? Can I start that one off?
Yeah, go for it.
Is that okay? Okay,
Yeah.
so why do they wear clothes? So one of the theories is that they come across to us in a way that we can understand them. And they come across a lot of the times with an almost a uniform for their purpose or where they come from. So, and in the back of my mind, I've got a cheeky pixie going, because we don't want to be naked. that kind of fairy response. We don't want to run around naked, would scare you all, Do they have, so Jo, do they have a society like human beings? Are they made up in a sort of, in a way that we are?
Well, a lot of the folklore, a lot of people seemed to think that they did have these various societies, and that, you know, especially in the medieval Irish literature, they would, you know, dance and hunt and make love and feast and always having parties. And if somebody kind of stumbled into their world, if they went in, you know, sort of leading on from what Neil was saying, if one of their worlds was said to be, you know, within the earth, and particularly in mounds, so burial mounds, but some mounds that weren't just burial mounds, just even hills, they could be, you know, those could be deemed as their worlds, or caves. If somebody ended up enchanted into their worlds, then this is what they would be greeted with, these huge halls of feasting and, you know, merriment. And so there was the idea that they did have these societies. I've never, you know, in a kind of like experiential, you know, speaking to people about their experiences, I've never met anybody that has talked about going to those societies. However, Morgan Daimler, and I think it's her Celtic, I think it might be her 21st Century Fairy book, or it might be Celtic Fairies, I'm not sure, one of the two. She talks about having, I think it was a dream or a vision that she had, where she actually went to where they lived, you know, their city, but she said it was like a city, and it looked like a modern city. So that's really interesting. And I think, you know, she had heard that there were other people that had experienced that too. So for me, if you're going to look at the folklore, if you were reading something like Evans Wentz, for instance, you would hear a lot of the folklore talking about their societies in this way, but there's not a lot of people that talk about having seen it in modern times. But if anyone out there has, and of course we'd love to hear about that, because, you know, that would be very interesting. And I think also sort of with the clothes, it makes me think, you know, that if we think about the fact that they are appearing often, say for instance the Brian Froud characters, they're often in clothes that maybe are of an era when we were more in tandem or in contact with fairies. You think about everything that's happened since then, and how society has moved on, and, you know, you've moved away from the land, etc., etc. You know, the way that they're dressing is kind of like what they might have looked like the last time we saw them. Now, I can't say, it's just that's just my feeling on that, and we can never, you know, none of us have the answers here, we can't prove anything, but we're just kind of bouncing these ideas about. But that's my thoughts there. Yeah, what about you, Neil?
Yeah, there's in terms of the clothing and the way they look, sometimes fairies, I'm talking about the folklore primarily, fairies can appear as normal human beings. They have no differentiation, whereas more modern fairy sightings tend to make them more humanoid. My own experience is that's certainly been the case. They're not quite human. They're like a pastiche of human. And as for the folkloric stories where they're wearing certain clothes and how they're depicted in art, there must be an element of cultural overlay on that. In people from the past are trying to describe in the written word or in visual arts, they're trying to describe non-human intelligent entities, and in order to make sense of that and to make it more palatable, they clothe them in often clothes of a generation or more before, just to make it a sense out of what is the supernatural quality of fairies. I think so. There's a lot of cultural coding going on with the specifically in terms of the clothes of fairies, I think.
Have you got anything more you wanted to add there, Kate, on that? Thank you for doing the questions, by the way.
That's okay. You can see me sort of scribbling it to the side. I think for me, one of the areas that I'm really interested in is that kind of ceasing into modernity of things, of the cultural aspect. So clothing, music, everything kind of stopped sort of Victorian, and nothing really went beyond. So you have fairies in big blousy dresses that are of an era. The music is, you know, harps and what have you. And Neil and I have spoken in great length about, you know, do fairies update themselves? And we did have somebody, I think, talk specifically about music, how they had been led by something that was like a distant techno, didn't we? And they kept trying to get nearer to this drumming music, this rhythmical music, and it kept moving away and away and away. So I think I would be interested to know if anybody's come across fairies in modern garb, for a start. And yeah, the cheeky pixie in the back of my mind is saying, has anybody ever come across a naked fairy? And I don't mean a fairy that looks like it's got bark skin, but one that's very humanoid. I would be interested to know if anybody's actually come across a naked fairy, or are we not allowed to give that information away and it's kind of overlaid? That'd be an interesting one.
I can come back to you there on those 2 points, actually, because the remote encounter, the very first episode I did with the guy, that it was actually, he'd seen that being in the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, and Ardnamurchan Peninsula, and it was a grey being, and it was naked. It had grey skin, and when they you know, kind of set eyes on each other as he was walking home at dusk, this being just ran off, but it was naked. And the other thing that makes you think about the modern sort of modern dressed fairies is the encounter, and I cannot remember his name, it's David something, but he was situated in Manchester. You know, the guy that saw the Modern Fairy in Manchester. So he was going home one night, and he got this guy coming up to him saying, "Can you get me a girl? Can you get me a girl?" Do you know that encounter? I'm going to have to post it. I'll post it beneath afterwards. And this guy, so it's like a Saturday night out or whatever, it's early hours. This guy, I think his name is David, apologies for not having his name, it's a just useless memory, but he was on his way home. He's gone to a card machine, and this guy's come up to him, and there's something a bit off about him, but you know, he could have blended in a city, because it's this middle of a city. And this guy is saying to him, "Can you get me a girl?" And the guy that's you know, talking about the incident, so it's this really weird thing to be asking him, but he tries to shake him off, and then 2 times this guy ends up coming up to him from a completely different, there's no way that he could have got to, you know, where he was in with earthly potentials. It was just like an other than human encounter with this fairy. And of course, you know, there's lots of examples of this with non-human beings that appear to look like us, but usually they get it a bit wrong. There's always something, they get it a little bit wrong. I think of, you know, Paul Sinclair talked about an encounter with this guy. I mean, he didn't know where he came from, but there was something about his skin. It said it was as if it was like he had makeup on, and it wasn't real human face, but somebody trying to look like a human, a bit like sort of Men in Black, these kind of, you know, situations. So, you know, there is that too, got to say.
I think in modern terms as well, that could be attributed. I've heard a lot of people say, you know, that's a starseed quality, or, you know, that's somebody with, you know, that crossover blood into the Palladians and stuff, which brings us beautifully, like this segue, Neil, you'll like this segue. So a couple of on topic questions. So there's been so much, and like I say, I've just scribbled these down, so I apologise if it's not in full. So much videos, coverage of things like UFOs, UAPs. Why do we think that there's no real fairy footage?
Well, going back to Neil, non-corporeal, you know, but I've spoken a bit there, so you guys carry on, because yeah, I'd love to know what you think of that.
Well, you know, obviously there's a massive crossover between the UFO phenomenon and the fairy phenomenon. Most recently, in detail, Joshua Cutchin, our mutual friend, has written about this, and he's very much, as am I, of the opinion that all these phenomena are coming from the same place. That's not to say they are the same thing, but they are coming from, whatever you want to call it, an extra dimensional realm, an ulterior reality, and they're popping into our reality. And it has to be said that there's a lot of crossover between the stories, both the folkloric and the modern fairy stories, and UFO stories. I'm thinking most specifically in terms of something like the abduction phenomenon, which is a very large motif in fairy folklore. They're always, kidnapping mortals for a variety of reasons. And sure enough, that's what the inhabitants of the UFOs sometimes do. There's the equivalence of lost time when you're spending time with the aliens, or whether you're spending time with the fairies. There's all sorts of motifs that intermesh between the two of them. And so I would say, I'm certainly not the first person to say this. This goes back to the 1960s with Jacques Vallée, most primarily in his 1968 book, Passport to Magonia, where I think he's the first person to specifically say this. He went as far as to say they're one and the same thing. The fairies and the aliens are the same thing. We're just culturally coding them for our times. The aliens are more or less a sci-fi update of fairy folklore. And then you would have John Keel very shortly after, actually maybe probably contemporary with Jacques Vallée, but I think he was writing about this a few years after, saying exactly the same thing. And he brought in everything. He brought in Bigfoot, all kinds of other crypto creatures, and he's saying they're a type of pure consciousness. And when they interact, as I was saying before, when they interact with the material world, that's when they become what we see them as. And a lot of it is to do with our consciousness. What do we want to see? You see a light flying in the sky, a modern person would think alien spacecraft, UFO. Why does that have to be? There's plenty of stories of lights in the sky in fairy folklore. They didn't think of it as an alien spacecraft because that's just not how they were culturally wired. So there's that element to it. And the third person I want to put with Jacques Vallée and John Keel is the great Patrick Harper, who you've spoken to on the podcast, Joe. And he's following in their footsteps, really, in terms of saying exactly that same thing. They're all coming from the same place. They're all basically the same thing, manifesting in different ways to different people depending on their state of consciousness and their cultural coding. So that's a very long answer to say yes, the UFO fairy knit up is extremely tight. I think that you can't separate one from the other.
There's two other aspects to that as well. There's one, the massive one, which is the elephant in the room, which is fairies are taboo within the supernatural umbrella and still are very much taboo. So if you have got a picture where you, and somebody's just put here that they had a picture and they zoomed in and they saw, somebody staring back, and it's, where do you go with that? Who do you show that? Do you really want to lose credibility as a human being if you share that information with somebody else? These things can be knocked back to pareidolia. The other aspect of it is, how many clear photos and footage are there of actual aliens roaming around? We have footage of UFOs, UAPs, but actually people taking photographs of aliens are, I would say, as rare as things like Bigfoot. And it's not something that's a common occurrence, but we do have these images and video footage of very material looking craft, if you like, it in the sky. So yeah, that's just my add in. Neil, while you're on talking one, and sorry, Joe.
I was just thinking that in terms of, if somebody's asking why don't we see kind of film footage of fairies, in my view, and this is just my view, and I'm not saying I'm right, but in my view, I don't think that's going to happen. You know, if people are waiting for kind of evidence to see fairy footage on a camera or film on photo, you're not going to capture that because they are not material. But what you may capture is lights. And as you say, you know, that's interesting because, you know, we do capture lights that represent UFOs. We do capture lights that, I believe, not all of them, but some of them, orbs, lights, it can be related to fairy, because the where you see an orb with the naked eye, which many of us do, okay, what you are seeing there is consciousness manifest. Now, we, or whoever, if you've got a group of people, one person would see that as just an orb. Another person might see that as an actual being, because you'll see there's layers of consciousness, and it's a bit like tuning into a radio station. You're just going to see whatever layer you are tuned into. And so if you see, as I say, the orb itself, to me, that is just the kind of condensed energy of consciousness. And in that way, it does appear as a light or an orb. However, you know, somebody else, and it has, you have had incidences of this where there's been multiple witness sightings, both with alien and UFO sightings and fairy sightings, where people see different things. So this is part of the phenomenon. So yeah, just to answer that particular part of it, that was my thoughts there.
That's good. I'm sorry, I get overexcited about interjecting because we've got so many questions that I'm like, got to get through them all. That was brilliant, Jo. Jo, I've got one for you on a personal. So, would you be comfortable in sharing your childhood experience of levitating?
Oh,
Is that safe for another day?
I think we'll save that for another day. But what I can say is that, you know, I've spoken to lots of other people who've experienced what I experienced. So if there's somebody out there watching now and thinking that, you know, they feel alone with that, you are not alone. So many of us did this as kids. It's a very natural thing. And, you know, it just makes you think about our capabilities as human beings, basically. So yeah, I will be writing a bit about that in the book, and I will talk about that at some point, but I want to sort of allow that to we'll come back to that at another time.
We'll park that one.
Yeah.
Before we park it, can I very quickly say, in terms of levitation, you need to go and watch the 1970s films, early 80s as well, of Andrei Tarkovsky.
Oh yeah.
He was a Russian film director.
Yeah.
About 8 or 9 films, and in every single film there is a scene where someone levitates.
That is so interesting. I have seen a number of them because Peter, my husband, is seriously into him, so I've sat through many hours because they are quite long as well.
They are, and the levitation scenes are often nothing to do with the plot. It just, it's scene interjected. There's a kid rising up in bed. What's that about? And then we're back to the story. So, but that just triggered that thought in my head. Sorry, we're
Thanks
off topic.
for that.
So one for you, Neil. And again, it's slightly personal one. Not that personal though. I was
you're breaking up, Kate. You're breaking up.
Can't hear you.
Has Neil had any experiences with his fairy visitors recently?
So this person will be referring to the Charles Bonnet syndrome that I have, which has allowed me to interact with fairy type entities on quite a regular basis since I had my eyesight problem from 2016 onwards. And from 26 onwards, it was, most people will have heard this, so I'm not going to go through the story, but it was very regular. I very regularly had the experience of fairy type entities turning up in my house and interacting with me for different time spans between 30 seconds and maybe a minute and a half before just disappearing. And most people would say that that's an effect of the Charles Bonnet syndrome, which is a well-known syndrome which affects lots of people with eyesight loss. Now, earlier this year, last year, spring of last year, 2024, it stopped happening after 8 years of it regularly happening, and it just stopped. It stopped for about a month, and it happened one more time, which I think I remember telling Joe about on something we were doing, some podcast, and I thought, oh, they'll come back, but they hadn't come back. And now looking back on it, it might have been a farewell. They weren't saying farewell, but it just, and that's the last time it happened. That must be April of last year. And since then, it hasn't happened. And to be honest, I feel very disappointed about that. It's almost like being deserted, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. And, it is what it is, and you just have to accept it. But it is very disappointing. Most people with Charles Bonnet syndrome are terrified of what they're seeing. They want to get rid of it, but not me, because it was never terrifying. It was always helpful to me. But I'm afraid since April, that's nearly a year, 9 months, that seems to have stopped. So no, they've gone.
Theory about that. I wonder whether you dropped them off at Wollaton Park in the May and they stayed there with the gnomes. You've got to come back and pick them back up again. Maybe they decided to have a holiday with the gnomes.
Yep.
You'll like this segue. This is a good segue. So we've had, why did the Wollaton children or adults not come forward? Why are they not coming forward? Shall I start on that one?
Oh, that's your case.
Go on then.
So we've got to be really tentative about this question, and in a nutshell, their I can't say this word, anonymity. Somebody say it for me.
Anonymity. All together.
Anonymity is absolutely paramount to them for whatever reason they choose. And although we have, as a collective, tried to pursue different avenues to talk to the children who were involved in the Wollaton case, I think it got to a stage for us all where we decided that those leads were perhaps best not followed. And we have got our reasons, but for their sake, we have kept a lot of information about that back. So we're giving them what they're basically asking for by not coming forward.
Yeah, it's right as well. They were kids, and I often think about what that must have been like for them, because we all remember what it's like at school to be different. And if something happens to you and it's a bit different, okay, you might be, people might be taking an interest in what you're doing for a couple of days or something, but sooner or later, people start to get horrible about things, don't they? So I do think of those kids sometimes and think about what they must have gone through at that time, and to be in the national papers, I'm sure that they must have felt like everything suddenly just got really big. And I like to hope that someday we will get some answers to that mystery, but that's not in our hands, is it? And fairies, it's never straightforward. It's never a kind of straight road. So yeah.
On top of that, somebody's asked, they haven't heard of the Wollaton children. Is there an episode? Yeah, so Joe has some footage from when we went as a collective on this channel. Neil and I have spoken about it on Hare in the Hawthorn. So if you want to catch up on that and find out what we've been doing, all the information is over both sites. So knock yourself out. There's loads of information on there for you. So we have literally, we've got 15 minutes, guys. So get your questions in. Please type them in bold. I'm loving them. I'm trying to get through. We've got, I think, 2 more biggies, but we've got definitely room for some more.
You're doing an amazing job, by the way, Kate. There.
Yeah.
Really are.
I feel like I feel like some kind of radio runner at the minute. The person who sits in the background at the radio and goes like, right, we've got another caller for you. What kind of fairies would leave a bare patch under an oak tree? I think that's one to meditate over, isn't it?
A bare patch and what? So what makes them think that it is fairy would be my first question. And I guess that's difficult for them to come back on, but Yeah, why would they leave a bare patch under an oak tree? I mean, yeah, there's so many questions I'd want to ask there. Maybe they can come back to that one. What was the other question? Pardon?
Yeah, I just thought straight away that if there's a bare patch, and I just saw it as kind of a bare patch going round an oak tree. But I know that animals will go round and round a tree. I've seen it where cows will leave indentation pathways where they rub up against the tree or whatever. But I'm not saying it's cows. Anyway, right. So next question is, where and when is it possible to see the three of you live, for example, at lectures or festivals?
Oh, that
Come on,
would be
hit us.
nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, we've got to. When? Because we did Glastonbury Town Hall. Was that last year? Was it the year before? Can't
Year
actually
before,
remember.
2023.
Was it? Yeah, so we did October 2023, didn't we? Well, this year we are getting back together again to do some Nottinghamshire shenanigans part 3. But I suppose that's not the same as going along to see us live. So yeah, I guess maybe we should do something. There are the fairy fairs coming up, and I know you'll be at those, Kate. That's down in Glastonbury. That's Karen Kay's fairy fairs that she does. So and I think it's because we got asked to talk at that one, but well, hopefully we will get together at some conferences later in the year. I myself at the moment, I am head down writing, and so I'm in writing hibernation and not really doing much else. But have you two got some conferences coming up this year?
I have a raft to the point where it's making me quite anxious about going up and down the country. So off the top of my head, I've got Weird Weekend, which is in April. I'm doing Parameet, so I'm doing all 3 of the Parameet conferences. I have Para Ascension, which haven't advertised yet, which is towards the end of the year. I'm sure I'm missing out a few more as well. It's been one of those years. Not on the Wold, which is a new one that's over in Lincolnshire. That's Dr. Kate Chirell. So there's going to be some great speakers and a market there. But we definitely need to get together as a 3.
Yeah.
We've got to drag Neil out, drag him out into the big wide world. And
yeah, see, this is I was thinking, am I doing anything? No, I'm not doing anything. It's I've kind of stepped away from giving presentations live. It's just, I don't know. It's just not my. It's starting to be not my thing. I mean, through my professional life, I used to do it all the time, like weekly, multi-weekly. But that kind of tailed off when I had the eyesight problem. But I'm not blaming that for why I'm not doing it. It's more, I don't know. It's putting a presentation together is a massive lot of work, and not to be taken lightly. And you can always tell the people who have done their preparation for a presentation and those who haven't. And with some other writing projects that I have on the go, I've just got to make priorities, and my priorities are not really speaking publicly, just for not this year anyway.
I should say, because I think they'll tell me off if I don't mention it, I am doing a course, a weekend workshop with House of Zophiel. That is going to be the weekend of the 5th and 6th of July. So yeah, Zophiel as in Zophiel. So I'm going to do a fairy weekend with them. I can't actually remember where it is, but I know it's up somewhere in the north of England, and it's a sort of residential weekend where we're going to do some kind of exploration around the theme of fairy. That's with Nat Clegg, as I say, from House of Zophiel, and another couple of people. So it's kind of a bit of a mixture of things that we're going to look at that weekend to do with fairy. And the other thing that I am doing later in the year, I'm doing, so many of you know that I work as a healer as well as doing the podcast, and I started doing the healing stuff. I started training with Body Mirror System in 2005. Well, this year I'm bringing it to Bristol, and we are doing a weekend 22nd, 23rd of November, I'm bringing Aniek Brofman over. That's Martin Brofman's wife. He's the creator of Body Mirror System. And we're going to have a weekend workshop where people can come along and learn the system. So that's something that's kind of, I've putting things sort of that half of the year, because this half of the year is for writing. So that, but I think in amongst that, let's try and meet up at one of these events and maybe do something together, because I think that's a lovely idea. And thanks, whoever suggested that. Thanks for getting that ball rolling, because we really should.
Well, there is something on the cards, Jo, for the end of the year that I can't really say much about.
Oh, yes, there absolutely is.
That I'm going to drag Neil to, but I've not told him I'm dragging him to it yet. I don't know whether this is a cry for help, so I am going to shout it out. So, Watermelon Man, if you're still down that well, I haven't got a lassie dog with me to send out to go and fetch you. So we've got a message that says, "I'm stuck down a fairy well. Can anybody hear me?" So we've got your message loud and clear. However, nobody's coming to save you, I'm afraid. You're stuck down there with the fairies. So moving on, somebody said, "Is that Hare in the Hawthorn tea towel?" How cheeky. How cheeky.
Oh, that is lovely.
It's my very expensive banner that I got off the internet. You can't buy them. I have thought about doing merch before. I have got a couple of t-shirts and a jumper, and Neil's got a t-shirt, Hare in the Hawthorn t-shirt as well. If anybody wants any merch and there really is an interest in it, I can certainly set something up, and you can use the design and choose your jumpers and stuff. I've got a real good printer, so yeah, a bit of a blatant plug out there. Anyway, back onto the questions. So, why certain people see orbs quite often? From a, can I just very, very briefly with this? I know we're running out of time. From a paranormal perspective, I often get people, because I'm a ghost hunter for those who don't know, that's my other hat. I often get people saying, "Oh, look, it's an orb picture." Now, it's a real bone of contention within the paranormal world, because there are lots of phenomena that can cause orbs within photos, whether it's dust particles or water droplets. So a lot of paranormal investigators will get quite rude and say, if it's an orb, then you need a bottle of pledge and a duster. However, I do say to people, if you see them with your own eyes, then you truly have experienced an orb. I'm not saying that you can't capture them on pictures. So why do people see them often? I think, for me, this is a question with all these different pieces of phenomena. Why do people see ghosts? Blah, 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 blah. There's new scientific study that's come in to say that people who have regular paranormal episodes have got different brain waves, and I don't know the part of the brain, but the brain ticks differently, so they're more predisposed. But for me, simply, it's observation. So I can go into a woods and be walking along with somebody, and I have to really try hard to say, okay, I'm in the woods, everything's left behind, I am observing what's around me. I'm not being in my brain space. So I can see mushrooms and squirrels and whatever and whatever. The person walking next to me can be treading on these things because they're in the brain space and not generally observing. So I would say that that's another factor. What do you two think about why people see things phenomena more than others?
Do you want to go, Neil? And then I'll...
Yeah, I think you're right about it. Just depends how your brain's wired up and how your brain is filtering the consciousness. Some people are simply more psychically attuned than others. I think it's probably as simple as that. Having said that, I sincerely believe that if the conditions are right, anyone can have one of these experiences. It's not just for special people. Or people with a condition like Charles Bonnet syndrome or whatever, or people who've been taking psychedelics. Anyone can have this experience if the conditions are right. But it seems pretty obvious that some people are more predisposed to have whatever you want to call it, paranormal, supernatural experience. Although thinking to the fairy census, the Fairy Investigation Society census by Simon Young, both of them, the 2017 one and the the 23-24 one, it's very noticeable that many of those people who are reporting fairy type experiences will say, this has never happened to me, nothing like this has happened before or since, this is like a one-off. And that kind of enhances what I'm trying to say in terms of anyone can have these experiences if conditions are met.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And you know, talking about how open people are, if a child, for instance, you know, is able to see things and then is told, don't be silly, there's nothing there, you know, these are the kind of things that close you down. Whereas if you grow up in a family where someone might say, oh, you know, that's interesting, tell me about that, you know, you start to open more. And so you get people that just never really kind of close down. They are able to just accept that that is just their reality, that they see these things. And for me, it's usually when I used to have great fun at you know, when I was in university, because when you're watching somebody give a lecture or even a presentation at one of these conferences, when they're really talking about something that means a lot to them, when they're talking about something that is very meaningful, you start to see these orbs around them. Try it the next time you're in a live situation where you can see somebody, particularly if they've got a white wall behind them, that does help. Just let your eyes go a little bit fuzzy. Anyone can do this. It's actually something we look at on the Body Mirror System weekend, seeing auras. Just let your eyes go out of focus and just kind of look at them and sort of around them, and you'll start to see what may be colors or shapes, and you'll notice that there are these pinpoints of light when they really get into the nub of what they're talking about. So you know, it's not a special thing. Anybody can see these.
Brilliant. So just a bit of a shout out for the people who've said where they're from. We've got somebody from Norfolk, we've got Hull, Northern Yorkshire, near Cottingley, Dartmoor, Manchester, Australia, Sheffield. I think that's all that I've caught. Now, I know that we're on literally the 3-minute countdown. I can't believe how fast this has gone. Me particularly, we were saying before, I was super nervous about this, but we've kind of flickered up into the 100 mark. So 100 people have been viewing this, which is crazy good. So thank you all for that. Just want to say that Watermelon Man is going to win the fairies over with his charm, so he'll be all right down the fairy well. I was getting concerned about that person down the fairy well, and I'm sure you'll enjoy your evening with them. Quick question to everybody: if you could press the like or whatever, do you want us to do another live? Would you like us, the three of us, to do another live in the future? Is that something that people want to do? Okay, and I'm going to go back to Jo. Any guesses on the box?
Oh, well, do you know what? Just as you asked that, and it's not something I thought of before, but I thought something around like a plant material. It just flashed into my head. So I don't know if it's because you put me on the spot, but that wasn't what I was thinking of before. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with, you know, something that is of plant material, like a leaf or a part of a plant, flower or something.
Shall I cheat?
Would you know what it is?
Yeah. You're going to cheat and say it, and then you've just said you're going to cheat. I'd have just gone, oh, I think it's a blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So, I'll let you do it.
So a lot of people were saying that they were getting feathers or leaves or triangles. People were getting the right colours. However, the shapes that people were getting were really, really good. Really good. So what's in the box is, and I couldn't get a good clear picture of this the other day, it's a dragon's eye.
Oh.
So a lot of people getting these kind of shapes.
The leaves, yes. The scales, yeah, like the
scales on it. And then
look like an oak leaf to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the colours in the eye, which are reds and oranges. So a lot of people were really, really over the money. Obviously, it's quite an obscure one. It was the only thing I could find at the time to put in the box. So there you go. You've all had the second exclusive.
Cool.
We haven't even done this on Hare and the Hawthorn yet. So loads of people saying
Great
yes,
idea.
they'd love for us to do it again. We'd love to do it because there's some really big questions that we didn't get round to. So we'll definitely come on again. And absolutely, I've really enjoyed the fact that everybody's been interacting. It's made it super, super easy. So
that's great. I did have a very brief look at the YouTube and seeing
Oh, yeah.
a load of chat come down. And obviously,
Cool.
you know, we don't have a producer in the background who can sort all this chat out. So apologies to anyone, you know, asking your questions. We just haven't had time to get round to it. And thank you, Kate, for doing it.
Yeah,
No, I've
thanks so
enjoyed
much,
it.
Kate. I might see if someone from our Patreon crew might like to volunteer and do that next time. And, you know, if they fancy coming on board and being the person who's able to ask us the questions so that Kate can get to relax and answer questions too. But yeah, thanks for
I've
jumping in there,
enjoyed it.
Kate.
Don't give my job away. I've really enjoyed that. I felt like I've had a purpose.
Well, yeah, that was really lovely. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. And we'll definitely will do this again. It's been lovely. And it's always nice to spend time with my friends anyway. So we do miss each other, don't we? When, you know, because we didn't get to see each other in October. So yeah, roll on later in the year when we can be together again. And lots of love to everybody that tuned in. And thanks very much. See you all soon. Big
Cheers.
thanks to Kate and Neil for
Bye.
you know, joining in. Bye.
Bye.